Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Xibalba devstream. Today, we're going to be working on some more Ansifii concepts. So I hope you're strapped in and prepared. I don't know why that's here or that. Bye. I just have to reduce the volume of my music real quick. Okay. What's up, Shirk? Welcome. Okay. So yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 days ago in the previous stream, you may remember that we introduced all of these units and slapped together concepts for what is currently called the Watchdog, obviously won't be called that for long, and the Squire, which is a hovercraft. Not to be confused with the Waylay, which was previously called Squire, is now called Waylay. Make it happen. Get with the times. Sub Luciferius and Roller Skates. That does indeed bring us to 3, and you know what? Out of every one of those messages, there were 3 U's altogether, so that's 3. Just put out another clip, by the way, where I talk about Riot Games, League of Legends, and Stupid, so check that out. And I guess that's pretty much it. That's the intro. What's up, Kubader? I don't know how to say your name, but welcome. This guy's a mapper in CSGO. That's where I know them from, anyway. It's Polish. It sucks, dude. One of the most productive men. Well, I guess besides me, the most productive man on the development team for our games is Polish, and he doesn't suck. But he does think that the Polish language sucks. So maybe there's some commonalities. He might show up in the YouTube chat at some point. Okay, so what we have on our hands here today, we're going to be slapping together some more of these units. I'm going to try to get a better understanding of how we're progressing. So I've talked about this more broadly speaking, but it looks like every single one of our steps forward is going to be a bit different. So obviously, I don't think that we'll get... It looks like unlikely to get an average of 10 units per regency per tier, or per tier of each regency. However, that's just my initial impression. We're going to discover that together and figure out what makes the most sense. Because right now we've got, 7, 8. So we've got 8 units conceived. We might get one more. I think there's a room for a healer. But I think we're kind of set for everything else. But again, maybe there's another branch that has a couple of units or something associated with it that you can branch into early on. I don't know. There might be some equivalent to the Shadow branch or some completely different branch that's like more specialized in some capacity. So we'll see about that, and maybe there's even some infrastructure stuff that crops up later. I think for buildings, we're kind of set. There is the idea that maybe there would be a utility structure or something, but because we don't have supply in the game, we don't have to worry about a supply structure like in traditional RTS games, or many RTS games have supply structures. So that means we can just have Tier 1 be production structures and a defensive structure, and then have tech structures unlock segments of individual tiers. And maybe that's actually what we can conceptualize. So before, the previous stream that I did, I was conceptualizing the idea that if you have a unit at Tier 1, he's not going to be replaced until maybe Tier 3, like 2 tiers ahead of him. And then a unit at Tier 2 will be more specialized, probably, and more, like, distinct. And they'll have their own combat role, and they won't get replaced until Tier 4. So, like, each unit really only sees a 100% natural replacement 2 tiers from when it's introduced. And then some units are just, like, one-offs. They're kind of, well, you could call them dead ends or something. So you can't really see like a lineage of like, oh, I can see where that guy was earlier in the tiers. Like, no, this guy's just an outlier. There's going to be stuff like that. So we'll see how that shapes up, I guess. But I think tech structures are a natural fit for our next push for the Ansifii. And then after that, we'll think about like what units they could unlock or whatever, and maybe consider other branches. But right now, I feel like this is a solid Tier 1. Like, if I was just going to stick at Tier 1 for the opening couple minutes, I think I could do a lot with these units. But I can also see an argument for like wanting to have more options, in which case maybe we make it so that tech up is a little bit easier. Right now I'm coming up with some concepts, and essentially I'm planning a real-time strategy game, right? So in real-time strategy games, you have different levels of technology, like different levels of advancement. So stuff that you can train, you can make at the beginning of the game. The units are not going to be as powerful, obviously. So I'm figuring out how we're going to structure that. And because the game is supposed to go on for a really long time, or it doesn't have to go on for a long time, but it can. I want to support that. So I want to support it so that you can play a game for like an hour and a half and still not have trained every single unit, theoretically. Because I want to achieve that kind of thing, I think it makes a lot of sense to consider whether or not, like, do we have sufficient options? Do we have enough numbers of units for that? So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. The conventional tech progression roller skates, I think, so this is what I was about to jump into before that brief explanation. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to jump in with the idea that for Ansifii specifically, since we're trying to make a very approachable sort of tech path, we might even conceptualize them as almost having half tiers. And maybe this is something that ends up happening for most regencies, but we just integrate it a little bit differently. Because I was kind of thinking, like, you've got tier 1, and it seems fairly robust. Obviously, maybe there's like the raw number of options are kind of minimized, but everybody remembers like conceptualizing certain units as tier 1.5. Like the Dragoon in the original Brood War kind of existed in a weird space because you needed a tech structure for it. Does that constitute 1.5? Because Citadel of Adun tech is tier 2, but that doesn't even unlock a unit. So like it was really weird for Brood War. I think it's better to not bother with a 1.5 or 2.5 or whatever and just have hardline tiers, especially for the sake of navigating the tech tree map. But I also think that there's a good argument to be made to have like certain tiers be easier to dip into and other tiers be harder. So I'm almost thinking on every other approach, just like the units themselves, where at tier 1, obviously you get to tier 1, so maybe it's a bad example. Say you unlock tier 3 and it costs a lot of resources to get a structure that unlocks tier 3 stuff. But then to get to tier 4, it's easier because you just need structures that are not as expensive as the tier 3 one, but there's nothing that unlocks everything at tier 4. So an example would be, if we go back to the tier 2 example, because I actually have some units here. An example would be like, okay, I unlock a tier 2 tech structure, like an engineering bay from Cosmonarchy and Brood War. And I say, okay, now I have this tech structure that gives me access to tier 2 stuff, but I still have to build all of those tier 2 substructures in order to get access to the specific units. Whereas maybe tier 3 is more like I unlock brand new production structures. And so all of the tier 3 unlocks, they don't come out of the gallery. They don't come out of the Fulcrum or the Omni Bay. So these earlier structures don't actually get any use, get any upgrades. And so it's almost like every few tiers you're overhauling your entire tech, like your infrastructure in some ways. You're sort of progressing up your infrastructure. So yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for stopping by. So I think something like that might work. That's basically what the add-ons kind of served as a in Cosmonarchy's Terran tech tree. Or if you guys remember, like you get the engineering bay and it unlocks covert ops and machine shop and salvo yard. So that would basically be like this. And then obviously, we kind of do have a basic understanding of that because then the science facility unlocked the iron foundry and the nadite assembly. So in this case, it would be like if the captaincy also required science facility. But you know, you kind of get the idea. So basically every few tiers you would get like brand new structures with brand new units. So that's probably like the most sensible or like intuitive approach, I guess you could say, for something that is a bit more conventional because it allows you to dip your toes into what's right next if you're on an odd number of tiers. So 1, 3, 5, etc. But if you're on an even number, then okay, now you know like the next one's going to be a bit more pricey. And so if that's the conventional approach, which I guess I'm not sure if it actually would be because I have to look through this, but like if I look for conventional segmented, it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there were 8, but one of them had a comma next to it with tiered production structures. So Psychora, yeah, their production structure is upgraded. So other than that, though, they're like fairly. It's like the old, really, really old OGs will remember this back in the Hydra days, where Protoss had to upgrade their structures to their production structures to different other production structures to train other units. So you couldn't train legionnaires by default. You had to warp into a principality, and then I forget what I think the old OG one for Hierophants was Warp Anchor, which is pretty lame. But then that got replaced by something else that I then removed anyway. So yeah, that seems like a pretty considerable, like, basic approach, in my opinion. And if indeed we do have something that is used by 8 out of 20 regencies, that doesn't sound like that, because it's not over 50%. That doesn't sound like a majority. But you have to remember that the other ones, I don't think there are other textiles. Like, there's probably like multi-structure tech progression. Yeah, we have 2. We have one for Dalventhos and we have one for Nadarasatha. There's only 2 for those, right? So that brings us up to 10 total. So I'm trying to get like a figure, like a totality of what we have here. So then if I go to, like, I knew that one was going to be kind of... Segmented Worker is like only Gadamemptor, I'm pretty sure. What's up, Carlos the Great? Thanks for the follow. We got, if I go to just tiered structure, I think there's a couple of those, right? So there's 3 of those. Let me just make sure. Yeah, okay. 3 of those. Orlithray, Thruck, and Roselium. Yeah, that's fairly standard. So that puts us at 14. Yeah, I think Segmented Worker is only for Gadamemptor, so that's 15. And then combat-based, there's 2 that I'm aware of. That would put us at 17, and the multi-branch... Really? Are there 3 multi-branches? That seems a bit weird. Either way, the one that has the most... Like, clearly the majority is actually conventional segmented. So that's good, because it would be really awkward if I said, this is the conventional way of tech progression. And then it turns out, actually, there's like, it's not even that common. So... Yeah, embassies for Embraseat. Embraseat are basically like a hyper segmented version, to be honest. They're multi-branch, which is one of the 3, I guess, that I was confused about. I thought these guys were actually conventional, but I remember now. The multi-branch thing is like... So it's basically like really old Protoss as well, from Cosmonarchy's Brood War mod. The old Protoss thing where it like... Well, I guess it's kind of like that even right now. It's just that the structures don't have any tech requirements, right? But it's like, oh, build a Cenotaph to unlock advanced tier 1 units, and then build this thing to unlock that thing. And it's like, basically they're going to be very similar to that. And just move my ripcord to the other monitor. Hey, that's a spoiler. You guys can't see that. Just close that. Ha! Owned. Okay. Where were we going with this? We were going to work on some stuff. I really, I'm holding out hope that at some point Veek finds like 6 hours in a day to just quickly in 6 hours code a GUI editor for the data stuff that I need, because it would be really nice to be able to do that. So if we are going to go the route of getting some stuff done and slapping together... So we know that we need, like, this is like, we'll just put B tier 2. So the question is, do we actually want add-ons? So this is actually something I've gone back and forth with in my head about. Because obviously Ansifii are meant to be somewhat recognizable, and most people, I would imagine, at least the most of the early adopters are going to come from games like StarCraft. They're at least going to know StarCraft. It's going to be very unlikely somebody picks up our game and plays the RTS portion without having played either of the StarCraft games. So, but specifically, I imagine most of the people who are interested will have played Brood War, most notably. So, because of that, I kind of do like the idea of giving them something that is fairly familiar, like a Regency that has structures segment, this conventional tech progression thing where you get it in pockets, and then stuff like that. Basically, I like that idea in general. Now the question becomes, like, how do we approach that? Do we want something that does handle add-ons? Because remember that, as everybody who's like played Cosmonarchy for a while in the last year or so, since the project really started to come into its own in terms of the core concepts, it's my opinion that it never really came into its own properly, because I was still just piggybacking off of somebody else's work. But now it feels a lot more like we're getting to the point where we can talk about it coming into its own and really being standing apart. But the thing that I look at here is the add-on thing requires a certain amount of it sort of mandates the ability to destroy or relocate the structure, or you need to implement some sort of weird system, which is what we were originally planning on doing anyway, where you can have multiple add-ons on one structure. And then I was thinking maybe you just add on multiple structures, but that doesn't really make any sense. Like, connecting multiple structures, that feels like more of a specific regency's way of building or something, as opposed to it being anything else. Well, the Cosmonarchy Brood War Terran requires a bit of a lot more forethought than it initially seems in order to figure out like what your composition is going to be. I think it's also quite possible that because I was trying to make it so that you could start in any branch and have a competitive composition to some extent or another, unless you got like blind countered or whatever, I probably didn't even achieve that, for one. But I don't even think that's really what you want. Like, I actually think it's healthier that you're building the entire opening of Ansifii around infantry as the primary handlers, and then you get like supportive units from armor and orbital, and how that continues in one way or another throughout the entirety of their tech tree, so that infantry really are the be-all end-all of the Regency. That's good from a standpoint of like keeping things consistent for the Regency and having a unique element that no other Regency really has, but also allows you to have some sort of consistent expectation of what you're actually doing. And that's probably the biggest issue with Terran, is that you actually have a lot of choices in the opening, because you've got 4 different branches that you can go down. I just remembered Shadow existed, right? So it's not just that you can contend with orbital or armor or infantry in the early game. You can also do it with Shadow, technically. So the idea that you have so many options, I think you probably get paralysis by too much choice. At least this is something that I have, where unless I actually have a game plan, like when I was planning the build orders for Cosmonarchy's AI update, where they actually use build orders now, that to me was like a lot easier to actually play Terran well, because I knew what I was going for. I knew exactly what I wanted to do before I got in. Whereas normally I do play very laissez-faire and just decide what I want to do on a whim. And Terran has a lot of flexibility in the early stages of the game, but if you miss a timing, it's more punishing than other regencies, other races, because they don't have the same ease of adaptability. If you're Terran and you need something from another branch, you probably need more than just one production structure for that branch. Or you need like 2 production structures, but then you need a tier 2 add-on, and you might not even be at tier 2 yet, or something like that. You know what I mean? So, and then there's the other issue of like Terran never really getting a proper tier 3/tier 4 armor section. They just have Penumbra and Pazuzu, and that's it right now. But yeah, I think the biggest like thing that you can do as a player to combat that is probably just have a game plan going into it. That definitely helped my openers out a lot. For example, like the most successful matches I ever had playing Cosmonarchy against players or AI was when I was like, oh, I'm going to vulture rush them, or I'm going to like bio bunker push them or something. And you could say that that's kind of cheesy, but the idea is that I knew what I was doing going into it, and then I didn't waste resources or time being a resource really, but I didn't waste minerals, gas, or time on shit like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'll just add a starport because I feel like using air units with my attack, and then it just like wastes everything. Yeah. Scouting is obviously important. It'll be a bit pesky for Ansifii to scout. That's why the waylay is pretty important, I think. You'll probably train waylays more often than you train other. Like waylay opener is probably going to be fairly common, unless you're expecting, like, unless somebody else is scouting for you, then you can actually train Mavericks straight out the gate instead, and like kind of save some time, and that can increase how strong your setup is. So you can already start to see where there's some tactical depth that's unlocked just by virtue of having allies, like assuming that you're going to have some allies and it's not a 1v1. But even if it is a 1v1, you could still waylay to scout. I also really like the idea of I really appreciate the mechanic of getting the opportunity, basically, to harvest hypervials, which is like this game's version of Vespene gas, without building a gas production structure. Oh, I guess we need an extraction structure. No kidding. All right, hold on. That's what we'll do. So my general take on gas production or hypervial structures, I think it's really important to. Okay, maybe it's not really important, but I think I would like to justify the mechanic of being able to harvest unsafely. And part of the way that I think that can be justified is if you have more expensive gas production structures or gas refineries, whatever you want to call them, hypervial refineries. I think if you have more of those in general, then you're a lot more likely, in my opinion, to slap some stuff together in a way that feels good, makes sense. I just realized the fulcrum's a bit too tanky for my liking. So I think for one, I think while you're building a reservoir on a hypervial, what did I call them? Hypervial. Hyperlines. There you go. While you're building them on hyperlines, the idea that I had was you can actually harvest unsafely during construction as well. So it doesn't block you from being able to grab some hypervials. And the idea is that while your workers are handling hypervials, they will take damage over time. So that's the unsafe part about it. They can harvest it from like they're not taking damage while they harvest it or whatever. But the idea is that you get a little bit of hazard if you don't have a structure on top of it, and that gives you. I mean, it's not just that it gives you something to do micro-wise, because you can obviously like riskily take a bunch of your workers, stick them on there, and pull them off when they're like closer to death or below half health or something. But then if you get attacked in the early game, you might be fucked. Like you might not be able to use those workers, obviously, or they could get sniped easier or whatever. So it's a trade-off. But there's also some regencies that can actually just decide to stave off building the structures because they can afford to dump some healers in the area or something. And the idea being that as long as you have those healers, those like mobile healer units, and you're not using them with your army, you're getting some, gas without needing to spend the money on a gas structure. Now that's theoretically something you could do forever, but it's not really massively sustainable if you wanted to actually use those healers for some other reason, or if they ever end up getting like if they require energy to heal. Obviously, that's not really sustainable. But then the other idea was that obviously if that base becomes under attack, these healers are still being like dedicated, tethered to the hyperline basically. So long story short, I think it makes a lot of sense to, based on everything else that has been discussed, make these fairly pricey in terms of how how they are put together. feel like I probably did describe the a vital stockpile. There you go. Although it's not really a stockpile, but so the other idea that I had was that certain structures, certain gas structures would have other benefits as well. It wouldn't just be that they. I think I'm not sure what the reservoir would have, to be fair, but I was kind of thinking of like working in some sort of repair drone type structure. This probably, I mean, repair drones specifically sounds a little bit more like Rosellium, but some sort of structure that has repairs would be pretty reasonable, I think. So it could be that this structure actually has them themselves. So you have another reason, essentially, another incentive to build the structure. Uh, you don't need to for every single regency. Some of them might have the incentive insofar as they don't have the so that there's the incentive because of you just want the safe harvesting basically, and maybe the incentive there is like the ones that don't have any bonus don't actually have any sort of but like they don't have a very steep cost associated with them, so they can be grabbed earlier or whatever. What's up, James? So there's a little bit of push and pull that we can do here. Let's track these new abilities. I'll work a little bit on this verbiage later because I'm obviously the stat is I'm not sure about yet. I almost said Vespian. That's another thing is we can make certain hyperlines already have self-infusion or something. So like maybe some high yield ones you wouldn't even need to put the structure on. You still could for other reasons. But like, okay, so actually this is one of the other ideas that I had. Similar to how we have tiered workers, we might have tiered hyperline structures where you can slap a tier 5 hyperline reservoir refinery, whatever the fuck, and you slap that structure on there and it like increases the resource regeneration rate or something like that. Oh, what's up, Apos? My favorite sci-fi novel. I'll have to think about that one. Honestly, I didn't read too much sci-fi. I still have Dune to check out, and it seems like the opening couple of books for Dune are they come highly recommended, so it's definitely something I wanted to check out. And those probably would end up being my favorites, judging by what everybody has said about them. I just haven't gotten around to them yet. I like Ender's Game, but I read it as a kid, so I can't really trust my old memory of it, as opposed to it being like a wholehearted recommendation. And I guess the twist that's in it has been sort of disseminated across the zeitgeist by this point, so not anybody really remembers too much about it, or rather, it's so commonly understood now that it's the impact is what people have forgotten. Well, mules weren't constructed conventionally. Mules were called down by a point and click ability that you had to have rote not memorization. It was just a rote task you had to complete on a timer, basically. It was the worst implementation of any sort of mechanic at all ever made, TBH. Okay. So now we will grab the reservoir and say, instead of this is infusion. Okay. I was kind of thinking about boosting resource regeneration straight out the gate with reservoir, but I'm not sure about that one. What's up, Stratos? It was a quick time event, but it never went away. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, actually. It's so funny because obviously what's obvious to me is that Blizzard both wanted to have micro mechanical and macro mechanical skill and strategic skill. So they wanted like all of these dimensions of skill, but they had no idea how to achieve that organically. So when they found out that by adding multi-building select and removing smart rally and doing all these other things, but keeping the game's scale so small, when they found out that this confluence of design decisions had been assembled, and it came at the cost of any sort of need to look at your base, they were like, oh, we need some reason for people to look at their base, because they never do. And the games are just about like, besides hitting some hotkeys to retrain units or whatever, they're just about, they devolve into just attacking each other perpetually, and it becomes a little bit more like a real-time tactical, because you never need to do much macro once you've set up your bases, right? Now, that's a little bit of an oversimplification, because obviously you do have to set up more bases over time. But the idea behind it is that it was a little bit closer to that than what they probably wanted. That's my reverse engineering of the situation anyway. It's my read on the situation. It just feels like they took the worst possible route. I feel like, as far as I'm concerned, we won't have to worry about that at all in something like the release version of Cosmonarchy, because we'll just be too busy, like, you're never out of things to do, and there is a reason to keep looking at your base, because you're always progressing up a tech tree. So even your main base, or whatever your OG starting base was, like, if you're building tech there's a reason to look. And the bases are going to be so much bigger, because there's going to be more build space, because there's going to be more structures, and you get the idea. Like, there's always going to be a reason to keep expanding your territory and claiming new ground. So I don't really think we have to worry about that to the same degree, even though we're using, I'm not sure about Smart Rally still. That's up in the air. But even if we decided to include it, even if we decided to also go the route of, well, we've already committed to multi-building select. We won't obviously have smart casting, so you don't have to worry about that. That'll actually make remaxing easier, believe it or not. But the idea that you have unlimited selection and stuff, like we're taking some elements that StarCraft 2 also did, but we're not doing it without any understanding of like what things they are going to change. We're not going into it completely blind. I mean, all you need to know is that Blizzard was so infatuated with the number 3 that one of their designers was quoted as saying, you need to make 3 You need to use 3 High Templar to make an Archon in Brood War because they had never played Brood War, and that guy worked on StarCraft 2. So 3. TBH. 3BH. I was kind of considering, maybe one Regency will have this. I was kind of considering the idea of saying, fuck it, and then making like a reservoir or some sort of gas production, hyperline production, require tier 2. Just be like, fuck you, man, harvest that unsafely. But I don't really want that to be like a something that's forced upon people. But I don't know. It might not even be a mechanic worth implementing at all, to be honest. But I feel like there's potential there, so I'm going to explore it. Yeah, I played a bit of Factorio. It seemed like a TISM game, which is fine if you're into that. But I always like my games to actually have a point. And I know Factorio technically had a point, but you had to do so much weird shit in between that it was not for me. Although I did admittedly play it super early on in its lifespan, so no idea what happened since. Say add reservoir, get push. Oh, right. 1 sec. I have to switch my screen here. So give me 1 moment. Spoiler mode activated, because I gotta look at something that is that I'm not supposed to show on stream, basically. Some important details. All right. And we're back. I did not play They Are Billions, but I have seen a bit about it. It seems a bit weird that they went the route of... the route that they went seems like it was basically real-time strategy type mechanics, but you couldn't engage with your enemy as much. As basically your enemy wasn't playing the same game as you. Which, you know... Okay. We have our reservoir. Hey, that means we have 6 structures now, dude. That's epic. 6 out of 40. I did see Frostpunk on Steam recently because I think it's on a sale or something. It looks a bit more like one of those 4X city builder simulation games, but it does have an interesting aesthetic, we'll say. I can see why people would be interested in checking it out anyway. To be honest, I used to have a much more hardline stance against games that were not RTS games, but people called strategy games, or basically people would use RTS as a label for like shit that isn't an RTS. But as much as I don't like the corruption of language, where people use the wrong words for the wrong things and the wrong labels for the wrong things, I also think, on a more cynical note, any press the RTS genre gets, where people are familiar with the term, like, even though it's not really right in a legit, like in a just a dictionary definition sense, especially I have like a vested interest in the RTS genre in general doing well and not being super niche. So if I go through and I make a game and I call it an RTS, but nobody's even heard of an RTS because all these other games have like correct, accurate labels, and nobody else makes actual RTS games, right? Conventional RTS games, we'll say. Because nobody else has even heard about it, they're going to be like, oh, I don't even know what that genre is. That's weird. And then maybe that's a barrier of entry or something. Now I could just say like, well, I wouldn't say this. This wouldn't be part of my marketing, but it would be like, yeah, RTS, you know, like They Are Billions and League of Legends and like what the fuck? Like there's RTS is used as like an insane, like just a weird catch-all term for everything. So. Temple defense map, and now that's every map. What's up, Bethrelethal? MMO games back in the day, every game was an arena shooter, then an RTS, then an MMO, now a MOBA, now a battle royale. Yeah, I never played much MMOs because it's sort of like the Factorio thing I mentioned, or like Minecraft is kind of the same thing to me. Like, I know there's technically goals in those games, but if the whole idea is that I'm supposed to play this forever, then I'm not interested just by definition. Like, I would basically, the game shouldn't, it's kind of a weird way to phrase this. The game should not tell you or be designed with the idea that you play it forever in mind. Like, the game shouldn't be designed to be played forever in the sense that you're always like grinding or whatever. And this is more an MMO argument and not against something like Minecraft or Factorio or whatever. But MMOs are designed to just have you play forever instead of experiencing new content and choosing to continue playing because there's new content. So obviously when I say forever, I mean like a long time. So you imagine like MMOs are designed to try to get players to subscribe and spend money for like years and years of their life. If I'm spending years on a game, playing a game, it should be because I enjoy the game, not because the game was designed for that. Like, you design for that indirectly. It's the same thing about esports. You design for esports indirectly. Like, you leave elements of your game open for esports to flood in if your game takes off and it has some grassroots success. And you leave the idea open in the back of your head and in the back of your code base or whatever you want to fucking say. Like, you're leaving real estate for that, but you're not designing like a fucking helipad and a big old billboard that says esports here, guys, esports here. You're not doing that because that doesn't fucking work. Like, you can say it works for like Riot Games or whatever the fuck, but it doesn't work for most games. Like, most games that marketed themselves as esports or esports ready was another buzzword that was back in like the StarCraft 2 release days. You know, I don't think I need to say much more because I just referenced StarCraft 2 and that's a dead esport. So you all know. My favorite RTS is called Tic-Tac-Toe. Yeah, that's like when people say chess is an RTS game. It's like literally turn-based, guys. It's literally turn-based. Like, you can't call it the first RTS game. I know you're trying to be super turbo hipster, but go make me a fucking coffee in Starbucks, idiot. Like, this is not an RTS. It's literally turn-based. I take a fucking turn because I'm white. You take the turn next because you're not. That's how it works. It's a turn-based strategy game. All MMOs now are bots, hacks, and loot boxes. Unfortunate, but probably true. I haven't played any. I do know that basically any massively multiplayer game, or it's not even an MMO in the sense that like it's massively multiplayer, but it's also like Path of Exile, which I don't think really constitutes an MMO. Maybe it's an MMO ARPG instead of a classical MMO RPG, because it's more like Diablo or whatever. Either way, like even in that game, like I'm pretty sure its lore is just a copy paste from Diablo anyway, but I've never paid attention to it. So I've played that game for like 60 hours probably. Maybe. I don't remember how much of that is idle time though. Yeah, I was really amazed when I checked out World of Warcraft after like 10 years, or well, it wasn't that long. Let me see. Maybe it was. Didn't it come out in like 2005 or something? I don't think I checked that out until like 2010. So it was at least it was like 5 years. And maybe I checked it out way later than that. I checked it out in the middle of like Wrath of the Lich King, or maybe the one after that. I forget. Anyway, the point is, I checked it out, and like the gameplay was so nothing. Like, you're literally just waiting for a global cooldown to come up to expire or whatever. Like, so you can do more actions. I was like, what? Like, why? So that was really boring. And like everything was a homing attack, like everything locked on, even melee, so you could just like run around. Like, what is this? Yeah. Pretty unfortunate. So yeah, when that happened, I was like, I'm out. Bye. So we need a text structure for the Ansifii. We need We need to decide what angle we're going with. Like I said, I kind of still am not 100% sure on add-ons. Because I think add-ons would require liftoff. I had made this argument, I think, in the previous stream as well. Like, if you have add-ons, then you either need the add-ons specifically to be relocatable. Like, I had the idea of add-ons being picked, you could pick them up with transports and move them around or something. But that feels like a really weird system to implement just so that you can have add-ons. But like, I don't think Ansifii need liftoff. So, like, I wasn't really planning on them having liftoff. I was planning on another regency having liftoff, and I just hadn't decided yet. But I knew Ansifii probably wasn't it. Like, it might even be Ember Seat for all I fucking know. I don't know. Or maybe it would be like a regional thing or something. So I would just say, like, if we're not going to go with liftoff, we probably can't go with add-ons. But I like the idea of branch-specific tech structures in between these tiers. So we've got tier 1. You got that. One tier 2 structure that unlocks the tier 3 tech structure in the chain, but also unlocks branch-specific tech structures that unlock additional units from these factories. It'll make a little bit more sense when I actually get the examples in. But you could imagine it would be something like the old school Academy. If you remember the Academy, guys, the Academy here unlocks the Constable and Strong Arm from the gallery. You just build one Academy and then you have that. The Fulcrum gets its tier 2 units unlocked by some mech version of the Academy. We can say Armory because Blizzard was very generic with their stuff. Omnibay would have like a tier 2 tech structure for the path sign and whatever else it has. And okay, there you go. You've got your units. Now, this would probably put tier 2 units at obviously a bit more of a specialized role or whatever. But I like the idea that... So basically, it looks like the even number of tiers might have less units than the odd number of tiers. But again, we're still figuring that out and discovering that. I might even decide to go for another 4th branch later on. We still got to figure out if we want to do that and how consistent that's going to be across regencies. But for now, I think like tier 1 looks fine. It could benefit from a healer unit. Another thing that might be worth looking into, because the gallery has 5 units planned, right? I feel like that's fairly good for a single structure, particularly a tier 1 structure. It seems fine. But I think like that would probably be the upper limit of what one production structure would be able to train is 5 unique unit types, maybe 6 at most. That's just my like gut reaction to those numbers. My thinking is, if we're only going to have 2 or 3 from, well, I guess if we're only going to have 2 for armor and 2 for orbital at tier 1, does that mean we want to pivot towards having more, like 3 per branch in tier 2? And so that way you're still justifying, like basically you would, if you see a player going like only 1 fulcrum, maybe he's not interested in teching up anytime soon. Or if he is teching up, if you know he's teched up because he's used tier 2 infantry units, but he's only got like 1 fulcrum, then you know he's planning to tech up even further on top of that to tier 3 relatively soon. Because if he was hunkering down to stand his ground at tier 2, he would have more fulcrums. And that's the kind of idea that I'm getting at, is you can kind of reverse engineer the player's mentality and plan based on how many of a certain production structure you've scouted. And so if you see a lot of Omnibays, you're probably expecting tier 2 to show up and him to maybe stay on that for a little while, because Omnibays, while they're useful at tier 1 for like supportive roles, a lot of them signals that he's staying at tier 2 long enough to get a large number of tier 2 orbital units. That's the kind of idea that I'm having anyway. Yeah, and I think 7 would be, even 6 would probably be a bit of an outlier, but 7 definitely. I think it's better to just, because we have so many unit concepts and we have so many structure concepts, like, it doesn't really make sense to overload one structure with a bunch of units. So, like if one structure had 10 units, like, well, that's all of the units for one branch or one tech tier or something. And even if those are divvied up among 2 or 3 tech tiers, it's still a non-trivial percentage. So, yeah. I wanted to drop the HP of the fulcrum slightly. So we know we're going to be doing another structure. We know it's going to be a tech structure specifically. We definitely don't want fucking engineering bay as our structure name. Oh, I actually wrote down some potentially epic things yesterday. Let's see here. There are no upgrades. We've been over this before, homie, and I wrote about it. It's right here. Check that out on the website. Yeah, when I'm looking back at these, like, there really wasn't a lot of, it was a lot of really boring, boring names for the Terran stuff. Now, some of the placeholders I've got for Ansifii are kind of boring too, but we'll figure that out. Yeah, it's actually an area where StarCraft 2 had a bit of an upper hand because they had the shield for the Marine, they had the wings for the Zergling. I don't think the Zealots had anything, but they just moved faster, so, well, if they were moving faster, you knew they had charge. That's actually still kind of deceptive, though, because charge is a pretty fucking big deal. For the longest time, I didn't even know they bundled movement speed with charge. I thought it was just charge, but you are actually moving faster. Like, it's a leg enhancements and charge in one upgrade, basically. It's pretty insane. Bunch of junk. Mm. I kind of want to say fuck it and just make a bunch of like weird combination words. Like Omnibay is pretty cool. It's actually one of the more compelling names for me for the units or structures or whatever. Path Sign is a little bit more like whatever, but I still like it better than some of the others. So I'm kind of like debating just slapping together like maybe not for this exact text structure where it's just unlocking tier 2, but just deciding to like just find two words that maybe especially together kind of give you some understanding of what's going on here and then say fuck yeah. What do you mean you can't organize units into hotkeys? I guess you're talking about control groups where you control 1, control 2. You can already do that in our engine, in our demo that we've got right now. I like Omnibase so much it might not make sense as a tier 1 structure name. That's the other part is like, at least Fulcrum is like, it kind of, it inspires imagery of machinery, but it's not like epic. So you're not like, okay, yeah, Fulcrum, sure. And Gallery is kind of like a similar thing, whatever. It's like, yeah, okay. But Omnibay is epic. Yeah, it defines what it is in the description of that section. Squads just refers to like when you click on a unit, but that unit is part of a squad, so you select the whole squad, and it just removes all precision from the game. So it's like Company of Heroes, Dawn of War, that stuff. I think I can't remember if Dawn of War 2 or sorry, Dawn of War 3 went back to single units. Because I know it was squads in the first two games. If it did actually go back to single units, that's a really massive point in its favor, but it has a bunch of other issues. So, most notably, heroes. they did at least try to do an actual narrative instead of like I remember one of their DLCs was exceptionally lazy because you were just playing as like whatever the race was that you whatever character or race you picked, it was still the same fucking campaign. And like I don't even think anything was massively different about the experience. There's just different dialogue probably, and you were playing as a different race, but it's pretty dumb. But Dawn of War 2 wasn't actually RTS, so whatever. One of them action games. So if we're going to think about what this unit or the structure needs to be called, we have to understand that it's a step above what we have currently for tech, but it's something that unlocks. So it's not a huge step, right? It's not a huge leap forward. I would like each tech structure that unlocks tier 3, 5, 7, 9, etc. I would like that stuff to be like to sound more like imposing, and the stuff in between to sound a little bit more almost important, but not like in a way that inspires that feeling of like, holy shit, this is going to be a big deal. So because of that, I am kind of thinking a little bit harder about like what this would look like. I was thinking about captaincy as the structure for tier 3 production. I think that makes a good amount of sense. But it might also end up being a higher tier. Well, I guess Treasury is probably a higher tier town center than Quarry, if we go that way. I actually forget how long it took to build a command center. Oh, yeah. So in based on the timings that I have currently, it looks like it'll be a lot faster to set up, like 15 seconds faster to set up expansions, as well as being 50 Magmite faster, but we don't actually know what Magmite collection rates are going to be compared to mineral collection rates, so it's not as useful. But you know how long something takes, so. I'm not actually sure if that's a good thing or not. Like, my gut reaction is that slightly faster will be better because we want games to progress. Considering there's so much more tech to get through, you do want games to progress at a somewhat steady rate. But I also kind of like the idea that if you scout something happening, you have more you have time to react to it, but you don't need to have like, well, I guess you can always scout something happening, something like an expansion setup, unless it's actively guarded, in which case you have to ask yourself the question of whether or not it's being set up. So I don't really know. It's probably fine, even at the current projected numbers, and that's something that we'll just figure out over time. I am having a bit of like a fit about unit names in general, where it's like, oh fuck, dude, this name has this etymology where it goes to humans. I can't go down that road though, because then I won't be able. I literally won't be able to use the English language. So obviously, but I was thinking like, would gladius make sense? Because that's like a sword, but gladius is like literally Latin, so it's a little bit more of a, in my mind, it's a bit more of a direct connection. Whereas if I'm using an English word or words that are clearly like a combination of other English words, then that's fine. I do have to update the Mason. Well, yeah, sword was never gonna be it. I feel like saber is a bit much. I wanted something related to boxing or MMA or something, but obviously all of the like most of those out there are just like names derived from the names of the martial arts that they use, because they basically just punch people. That's why I specifically wanted to target boxing. I was actually thinking of calling him a southpaw, actually, because obviously that's a stance in boxing, and that's what I used. That's where I came up with the southpaw name in the first place. I was also thinking about knight. I don't know if I want to save knight as a like the knight and stuff like that for another regency or not. But I guess I could look for something that's like gauntlet or something. Oops, I misspelled it. I guess gauge is a word. That sounds pretty epic. And I guess the other thing it means is a pledge, which is kind of neat. Kind of nice double meaning. And it also apparently means pawn. Well, gauge might actually work. Ansifii gauge. Sure. We'll go with that for now. Seems fine. Seems reasonable. The gauge, by the way, formerly known as rival, is the it's that old concept we had about like a melee unit that would heal that we then turned into a disruptive unit that would slow units. I think that works really well actually for the concept that we have going on here in general for a slow moving infantry force, or an infantry force that by and large moves at a slower pace than you might expect infantry to move at, which is like piggybacking off of the racial traits of the Ansifii. So I think that's pretty solid overall. Trying to think if there was anything else that I needed to worry about there, but I don't think so. So if we go for that, I guess we can pull. Wow, this is a classic. I didn't change up the icon. Oh, and I didn't fix up the description of the gauge. Just didn't even open it up, actually. I never know what the IDs are, these things. 199. Never would have found that. Yeah, Arsenal makes sense. I think even Armory makes sense. It's just like these things by themselves don't work, and like something like Bay or Facility is like a more generic name for themselves. So, or Academy. I think Academy could work a bit better, specifically for infantry, because you know that like, oh, this is a place for officers to train at. The only trouble is that strong arms, by comparison, I mean, it's not like this. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is the unit does not give me the idea that he's a learned man. But maybe he had to go to the academy to learn how to use electricity. I don't know. We'll use academy as a placeholder for now. And I guess the other thing that we might consider, we might even consider making it relatively simplified as far as the Ansifii are concerned, or in general, this sort of conventional tech progression style where it's a bit more segmented. The idea that I had just now was if there's a central structure that unlocks infantry, armor, and orbital units, instead of it being a structure that then unlocks another structure. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. But I'm thinking that maybe that would make some sense. Obviously, the other concern that we have is the approach of, like, does that simplify things too much? Not sure. It could. That's kind of why I liked the add-on system. I felt like it was a fairly graceful solution to this issue, because the add-on system is literally like enhanced specific production structures. It's just that these production structures don't stick around for as long as they would need to make that a sensible approach, I think. So unless the add-ons themselves can be reused, it doesn't really make sense, does it? Yeah, so I don't think we'll go with add-ons, TBH. I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit, but it does say distinct facilities enabling the expensive specialization. So that was the original plan, and it might even make the most sense. It's just that I think maybe I'm finding a little bit of resistance to the idea, specifically because there's only 4 units listed right now, but there will be more, which will allow you to stick with tier 2 a little bit longer. So I think I'll stay the course of what the original plan was, and we'll go with stuff like Academy being infantry only and stuff. And we'll see what that looks like. And then we know we need something for armor, and we need something for orbital. So is there a unifying trait we would be comfortable building the... Well, Guildhall can definitely be like a tier 5 infantry structure, that's for sure. Or I guess it could be a tech structure that unlocks like a specialist for tier 6 or something. Okay, so I'm thinking for armor, we already have the range of the cutlass, but we also have the siege mode stable stance thing. So we've got a couple of existing ideas. For Path Sign, it's fire. That's the most notable idea. But I also kind of like the idea that maybe these are units that can have impact while moving, and that would be the unifying theme. And we could make the, like, I came up with the idea, it doesn't even apply really because it's rotor and not like something else. But I was thinking like rotorized yard or some shit like that that references mobility on spacecraft. So then there's that like VTOL stuff. So it could be something like it could be a facility that handles stuff that's generally like that or whatever. So I think that could work out a lot. I think that could work out fairly well actually. But yeah, I'll have to think about that one. Yeah, but the thing is, like, what does rotary even mean? Well, first of all, rotary is something else, I'm pretty sure. Oh, no, it is something. Turning on an axis on the wheel. I thought there was, like, a... Okay, characterized by rotation. I mean, rotary noun? Maybe I'm thinking of some other thing. A part of a device that rotates around an axis. Yeah, we could just call it a rotary, I think. Because it's like it's sort of like Academy. If we do Academy, Armory, Rotary, like, they all end in Y. Could work. I don't think I'll do Armory, but it makes sense. We also need to like build like tiles occupied as a stat here. I just wrote a note so that I wouldn't forget that. Do I still have the Academy in here somewhere as an icon? It's probably like this or something. I don't see it here. This is where we Actually, I guess I can just go to materials, resources. Yeah, that's gonna change in this. At least for Ansifii. Not all tech structures will be massive, but because you're only building one tech structure in a game, unless it gets destroyed, obviously, one of a specific tech structure in a game, it doesn't really make sense to make it that you could just slap it anywhere. So I'm thinking of making, as one part of balancing out their impact, I'm thinking of making them quite sizable. And the production facilities will also be scaling with, in space with time. But I think some of the really notable unlocks are going to come from really notably large structures. So, and that might even be doubly so for something like there's the Quantum Institute, the Science Facility, or whatever. Like all those like tech structures that are just straight up tiers are going to be important for this probably. I think it has to be called underscore frames. The fuck? Maybe it has to be exactly in this position. CD frames for... I don't see anything here about a file path. Is it because it might be because they were dumped out with a different file format. Yeah, that was actually the reason. Prank. All right, let's refresh and see where the academy is. Here it is. What do we have here is 401. Okay. And then we'll set this to that. Oh, I was thinking rosary. That's why I was like, what? Isn't that like something related to nuns or whatever? Or religion? Or something? That's why I couldn't remember what the fuck that was. That's really funny. All right, let's think about what we want here for... Is there a structure we can use as a... is there an icon we can use as a placeholder? I guess it can be munitions bay. ID 121. I'm keeping a space field for the air units because there will be transports that can load in air units. So I don't exactly know how common they will be, but I want to keep the statistics in check there. So let me just take a look at what I did for the Wyvern's description here. So we got the rotary, the motive, the academy. We know we'll make a well, we know we're gonna take the idea of the stuff and add something here. So that was where I was looking into the cutlass, right? I'm thinking about the cutlass. It has range as a core element, but it also has that the opposite of orbital, actually, where orbital is like able to have impact while moving. The cutlass is able to have impact either moving or stationary, but there's like distinct elements there. I don't know if I want that to be like the main, like one of the main thrusts of the, if that's going to be the consistent theme. That seems like the obvious one, but it could also just be that these are like, you know, light tanks or something, right? Like light armor, and that could be the unifying traits. And so we could have maybe another one that's not really. I kind of like the idea of a garrisonable structure that acts as a little bit of a mobile bunker. The Roadhog just transports units; they can't fire while within. So maybe having a transport that has lower capacity for lower capacity provided, that could be pretty neat, actually. So yeah, I think lower capacity, but units can fire while inside makes a lot of sense. So maybe it only has like 2 capacity, but you can stick 2 infantry units or 1 heavy infantry unit or something in there. I think that would make a lot of sense. So, and we're going to talk about armor. Let me think about like what. Let's see, anatomy of a tank. Reasonable. Yeah, I think so. That does sound familiar. It might have been one of Voyager's mods. He liked to play around with stuff like that. So I guess we could play around with the idea of treads or something. So we can search. Where are treads made? Treads for tanks made. Let's find this out. Here we go. Continuous tracks. All right. So we know we're going to be talking about some sort of tank thing. So while I wait for something to strike me for inspiration for this, the structure that is going to enable these units, I can start to think about the name for the unit that is going to be added. This is where I probably should look into, like, so obviously the first one is like garrison. If I take a look at that, we have Citadel is probably going to be called like a one of the tanks, like Iron Citadel or something like that. Will probably be called that for the mobile base that you can train later. You know, I always had this idea a while back for Terrans where they'd be able to literally build space station pieces where they could just start moving entire bases could be built on these platforms. You could just move them around. It's probably possible now. It's basically something that like some of the long ships that these guys are going to have are going to be kind of like that. So, Ansifii will basically have that element associated with them. So now I'm thinking like, I guess I don't know. I'll take Nest or something. Kind of like Anchor, but yeah, that's kind of neat. Okay, we'll go with Anchor for now. Yeah, I'm kind of not sure if anchor, like, considering the anchor, their entrenchment thing, like, it could be, you could, from a design, like a thematic standpoint, the idea of like raising the anchor untrenches the unit, and lowering the anchor trenches the unit. I kind of like, I could see where that would be pretty neat. Um, Maybe they could entrench to give bonus range or something. And then obviously we would go for like some pretty heavy armor and heavy vitals on this thing. Um, I'm thinking about how loading, like how clown carring would work. And I'm thinking about considering space as more of a weight issue than just a physical space issue. And so if you have units loaded in, they will be counted towards your total space. Um, and that's just to prevent cloud carring. I think that's probably fine. So I will also note that. Basically, yeah. Well, now we have two tanks, but they also both entrench. So maybe we can work in the entrench idea after all into the name of the structure. I'm sure I'll clean my glasses one of these days. Every time I try, it doesn't work out. Gridiron is apparently an arena. I didn't know that. I wonder what the etymology is then. This looks like a little bit more of a specifically like a amphitheater. I mean, a football thing. I said amphitheater because I read amphitheater. Amphitheater. Thanks. It'd be kind of funny if factory ended up being a a text structure name. I was thinking of using workbench or something. This one's going to be a bit tough to come up with something that isn't generic or too specific. I'm looking for a name for the text structure that unlocks both of the entrenching armor. Installation. Owned. No, I'm not actually sure about that one, TBH. Like, machine shop is a potential one, I guess, but it's pretty recognizable and also not massively related directly. So see, the thing that unifies both of these concepts is not just that they're tanks, it's also that they dig in. So that's the thing that I wanted to specifically try to layer in, but what's up, Lundier? Or is it French? Lundier. Bonjour. Je suis très américain. Et toi? I can say it a lot faster than that, but it's funnier if I sound like I'm stumbling over every word. It reminds me of when I told DF I was learning French, and then he said something in French in chat, and I responded, and his reaction was, "Your French was a lot more promising over text." That's the biggest own of my life. Not really, but pretty good. Smithy makes a bit of sense for like maybe a higher tier. That might be like tier 3 factory or something. I'm not sure. Although it might actually be a text structure for like a factory thing. Yeah. I'm looking for something that describes like either where like how like something that hints at tank production or something that hints at being able to entrench and dig into the ground and use that. So if we could somehow get a name that links people to the idea of like siege mode style things or tank things in general, then that would be the best. But like, it's hard to know. I can't. It is quite difficult to come up with something that describes that in a pithy way. Especially since I'm not actually. I mean, I guess I am calling them. Yeah, I'm calling them armor instead of tanks anyway, which is a bit of a different term. But we could call it like we could hint at the fact that these units would have heavier armor and vitals by making it so that it's like a hull refining plant of some sort, or mm, yeah, maybe this is where we go for armor. We'll search up armor because there's like well, I suppose that would make sense actually. Then I'm fucked out of a name for the unit. What's up, Loler? Welcome back. I tell you to rewind because I just explained it, but you're not on YouTube. Owned. I think maybe ballast actually works out pretty well. It's a bit obscure, but maybe there's some like better synonym because this is something that gives balance. So giving balance makes some sense in this context, I think. But I'll use that as our placeholder because it's basically the best thing that we've come up with so far. Just so that I can move on to do other stuff. Anvil is a reasonable thing to use for like a structure. I think it could even be a sort of physical like vehicle unit too as well. Imagine trying to do this with like straight up melee units, though. I'll double my fist range. That's kind of goofy. Yeah, Bulwark always felt a bit generic to me, but I think part of that isn't. It's actually not generic. It's the opposite. It's that it's actually not commonly used, but it also isn't a very powerful word. Maybe that's what my real issue with it is, if you know what I mean. But Bulwark is something I'll probably work in at some point. Yeah, I know it is. It's just funny that people would probably be like, "What the fuck?" I mean, technically, their range is like 1 or 0.5 or something. It just won't affect melee units because logically, they are meant to have 0 range. So. I would also like to find a way to show the infantry inside an anchor, which will be interesting. Yeah, I think something using that for something that's like a really heavy tank that takes a ridiculous amount of punishment would be pretty nice. But again, a lot of the stuff that you're going to be fielding as Ansifii is meant to support infantry or augment infantry. And while it technically can do the job itself, like there's going to be a fair number of things that you're not really going to be massively interested in training, if you know what I mean. So. All right, oh shit, let's go back. What's that term called that like, oh yeah, I guess it'll be a steady sight line. That's fine. We got anchor and trench, garrisonable, anchor cannon. I wonder if this unit will even have a weapon. I guess if it didn't, there would be absolutely no reason to build it. I really don't think there's like if you weren't going infantry, but I don't think you can really not go infantry as Ansifii, so I think it's probably fine. But it's also probably okay for them to have like a light cannon of some kind. This would be a gun that's like reasonably high armor pen, but not very much damage. Is probably how I'll consider it. I don't think I really have a good alternative to that tank icon, TBH. 238 might work, I guess. That's 239. Hey, you were pretty close, Bailiff, though. That's impressive. Oh. Well, I think we got some icons wrong, guys. Owned. TBH. How do we manage that? Let's take a look. First of all, Academy. Oh, this is the ballast. I never actually put it together here. So this is category 2. Ballast. Okay. So we know we're unlocking the cutlass and the anchor. We'll probably unlock something else with this as well. All right, and what the fuck went wrong with our rotary exactly? 212. Something tells me I just got the wrong icon here. 121. Prank. Okay. All right. Suppose we could just use the yeah, let's do this. Well, they do have a fire unit already. It's the path sign, so it's the precedent has been set for sure. I wonder if I also replaced the armory icon. It looks like I did. This is where we grab 1, 2, 3. Well, they're not all going to entrench. Not all of the armor is going to. This is just for tier 2 stuff. All right, so let's take stock of what we've got here. We got the Academy, which unlocks Constable and Strong Arm from the gallery. We got the Ballast, which unlocks Cutlass and Anchor from the Fulcrum. And Rotary, which unlocks Path Sign and Motive from the Omni Bay. Take a look at these two because they are the ones that recently were added. Just wanted to make sure everything is put together here. Seems fine. Anchors here. And for ballast, we have this. Oh, the Cutlass didn't get updated to say that it uses the ballast or requires the ballast. And neither of these units were updated either. This is why I, more than anything, why I would like the a GUI editor for this, or some sort of thing that would like automatically create a link between one thing if it detected the link between the other or whatever. Okay. All right, that's pretty good, I think. Oh yeah, we need to add the anchor to the list for Fulcrum. So I think we're still in the money for I still think we're in the money for another vehicle somewhere, probably at tier 2, and probably will be a little bit on the speedier side. But then I'm not really sure how that makes sense with the ballast. But again, counterbalancing can be argued for speed as well. It's just that that would fly outside of the tier. So maybe we go for a fast, some sort of like mid-table unit over here. Or maybe we just have a mid-table unit here as well, and we don't really worry about it being fast. It just won't entrench. Well, we hope so, Loler. Welcome back, Shirk. Can you believe we went from 3 to, I think, 12 to now whatever we have now? In terms of units, obviously we also have more buildings. We have 13 or 14 units counting the Mason. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 buildings. Not bad. TBH. We still need a tech center's level up over here, and then a town center, which I already know is going to be the ministry. And then, oh no, that's going to be the treasury, isn't it? Is it too soon to call it treasury? That's what I wonder. Might be. Hell yeah. Trying to think of a term for some of these higher tier production facilities that we're going to need. I guess it doesn't really matter what I put there because we don't have sizes anymore. I think I've got some cool ideas, but unfortunately my name ideas are I don't know, man. My name ideas are pretty unit oriented. I just found like 3 that I wanted to use because 3. Oh no, I really only found 2, but I wanted to say 3. Artifice. Now, if that was actually a message from the fraud guy who just like clones accounts and hopefully got banned by Google, that would be really high level, and that's how I know it's probably not, because that would be too smart. That would be like hinting at fraud. Obviously, Artifice is fraud. Owned. Thunderhead should actually be the name for the strong arm, TBH. It'll be the tier 2 strong arm. You disliked my vid. I dislike your name. What are you going to do about it? That is true. Can't argue with that. Does Artifice have some kind of history? No, no, no. Artifice literally means like it's well, let me get you the actual definition so I don't just sit here doing nothing. Deception or trickery. There you go. It's literally fraud. It's fraudulent. So that's what I was saying is like if it was that guy who keeps like impersonating people on the YouTube stream, that would be really funny because you know, talking about Artifice. Yeah, technically it also can mean that, but most of the time I've encountered it, it's meant deception. Okay, let's configure this unit, and then I will go back to trying to make something happen. I guess this will be... I'll just say for every target hit, cloud burst gains 5 energy, and Gambit is a good name too. That is true. Also high. Let me take a look at how I phrased this in the waylay. Yeah. All right, so we've got that. Let me do the weapons. Where's my... Obviously, again, medium doesn't exist, so we'll need to restructure that later. But let me just go ahead and make a copy of this. I just closed something I didn't mean to. Owned. All right. Oh yeah. I'm actually not sure if this will even show up here, but let's go to the... We still don't have a proper name for this structure. I was thinking earlier that something like Fleet Yard would work pretty well, but I don't know. Or Fleet something. Or is it... I think it's Beam, isn't it? I don't know, it's just Canon. It's called Beam in the file, so that's probably what it's supposed to be, which is fine. Don't know how useful that passive will be, but I imagine ways where you'll be able to like heal. If you can heal your own energy having units, you can just create some interesting situations. Could work. TBH. Oh, that's the other thing, is I wanted to give him his weapon AoE. Okay, so the other thing that we had to fill out was the nebula, which I owned myself in by deciding to use. Hi. What a name. Yeah, dude. Dude, you got owned. Ugh. Real trouble is I still don't have a name for the production facility for this thing. So I'd like something that hints at weather, cloud cover. That's why I was looking for synonyms for cloud. Because this one's going to be, I mean, it's going to be about fighters and support craft and stuff that are going to be a little bit on the heavier side. Basically, tier 3 spacecraft are going to be the last tier that doesn't include like a variety of flagships, or not really flagships, but like heavier crafts, destroyers and stuff. I got pranked. Yeah, that's true. Very true. We'll go with our very own word. So if treasury is tier 3, so I'm thinking town centers will be every other tier as well, like resource drop-off nodes and stuff. This is where we are also going to need to copy the mason. I guess my main trouble is that the mason is probably too epic of a title for a tier 1 worker. But the one that I had planned for the tier 3 for Terran in Cosmonarchy Brood War was Talos, but that's from mythology, so that can't work. Even though Talos did work really well for something that's inspired by humans, since it was like an automaton from a flying automaton that safeguarded a Greek city or something. But because it was like an engineering machination, obviously that made me think like, oh yeah, that'd be perfect for a worker, as well as since it was meant to be flying anyway. The obvious one to go with is architect, but there's also smith, mechanic, machinist. Getting owned sometimes by Google and sometimes by me. I also feel the same way, to be honest. There probably is a better one somewhere. We'll use an edgy description there. Oh, I should have kept Thunderhead open. That's me being dumb, I think. Oh, wait. No, never mind. Thunderhead's actually fully done. Now these ones are too, I think. I just had the idea to have a succeeded by and preceded by field so that things that are clearly like steps in the next direction are going to be used in that context. Yeah, dude. How could you screw that one up? You know what I mean? I still have a massive list of stuff, but it was mostly good for units as opposed to buildings. Which is fine. Oh my god. What a boring person. Just gets destroyed by Google anyway. Google is so fucking slow to do anything correct, so the fact that he's stuck it out until that point is really embarrassing. For him. Well, I wouldn't have used Google for that anyway. There are better search engines for precise searches. Some of them, I guess, probably. I mean, you're going to get different results either way, but I don't think you'll get less useful results from something like a DuckDuckGo or whatever. Oh, I actually don't know if this is going to be a common ability or not. I'm being vague about the channel time because I'm thinking it's probably going to require. It's probably going to scale with how much build time it is, so it'll always be like a fourth of the build time or something. I'm not even going to bother doing anything about it. Eventually, I'll just not even read the YouTube chat, obviously. I guess I'll add that as a thing I should do as the Discord stream chat. Pretty stupid that that YouTube doesn't even let me actually click on people's accounts to see who's who from a chat. But also pretty stupid that some fucking retard is in the chat doing this for weeks now. Like, what an idiot. We'll go with a pretty basic description for now, I think. And I guess we'll keep the Mason icon too. Even though he's a flyer. Oh, this is an infantry attack. This is, I guess, a tiered attack. Well, I wouldn't be able to believe you either, but it's real, so. Dispatch should be over. Yeah. Yeah, climatarium needs to be moved down too. These are like the common issues you'll accidentally do, trying to figure out all this, trying to hold all this stuff in your head while you're trying to work from just text files. Some sort of visual preview would be really helpful here. All right. Fix tiers. Yeah, that's basically what I did with Veek. The fuck? Oh, I owned myself with that one. It was admittedly funny when he was destroying Skytech RTS in chat, but that was, I mean, when I'm actually trying to do some work, he's just like sabotaging the ability for me to have a clear-cut experience in the first place. So, like, what is the point? At this point, it's obviously malicious, and he should just be immediately executed. Okay, we're looking a little bit more reasonable now. I'll go ahead and swap this out for the starport icon. It's like 113 or something. 14. Yeah, it started in the last fraudarchy, which was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah, so. All right, let's take a look at the actual unit entries themselves because we probably botched something here. Oh, yeah, I would say so. All right. I don't think I did the nebula stuff actually, so that's probably why. Seems fine, I guess. Thunderhead doesn't have the right file name, apparently. It's called the Thunderhead Beam. Suitorhead. Missing the N, just like in real life. Alright, and then Nebula just doesn't have anything, which is why it was busted. All right, yeah, I wasn't sure if I wanted to give the Nebula an ability or not. Nebula is probably too epic a name anyway for a fighter, but we'll change it up later. For now, I'm thinking this will probably be just a straightforward fighter. Probably one of the... This will be like the first example of a unit that doesn't really fill a supporting role necessarily. And is like the first example of something that you could reliably use as a standalone unit that isn't infantry. So this will be how we explore that. We start to hint at that, and I think tier 3 stuff for vehicles will be somewhat similar. So in that case, yeah, I think we won't bother with an ability because we don't need it to be massively specialized. Just means we need to this. We'll say Nebula Rifle. Although I guess it could be a cannon too, but I'll try rifle. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something. We did something. I should change up the icon for the dispatch. I guess for now I'll use the NGBay icon just because it's going to be recognizable as a text structure for people who are familiar with Cosmonarchy Brood War, and we'll just go from there. What was this? 1, 2, 2. And then I think I just have to check on the cardinal. And let's just make sure this works correctly. Seems fine. Oh, I need to update the salvage icon. Iron Vault and Ministry. Oh yeah, and I never made the weapon for this guy either. Where's the Maverick rifle? This would be Cardinal rifle. What was the Mason melee? It was called M2S. Yeah, that was just melee. This is where I'll use that. Where's the Goliath cannon thing? I always associate it with floor gun trap because that's what I think it is. Oh, here it is, 326. And then I wanted to change the icon for salvage. I guess that's probably like best used for the fusion cutter thing. Okay, so Iron Vault will is the going name for the tier 3 armor. I guess I can just quickly slap that one in. Just copy the captaincy for it. Did I specify that the captaincy even has a requirement? No. All right, we'll do that. Oh yeah, that's the other thing is I have to go through all of this stuff. And this requires dispatch. All right, and then back to this, we are looking at, I guess I don't think I actually added a treasury section, or a section in the treasury for what it unlocks, yeah. So we know this unlocks the captaincy and Iron Vault and Climatarium. We just don't know what the tier, well, we don't know what tier 4 is going to look like. Ministry will be a tier 5 town center, so that'll be like the main brick of stuff there, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see. There's a bunch of stuff that still needs to be filled in, obviously, but so far I think we've got a pretty good handle on how things are being assembled. All right, let's go ahead and find whatever this one is, 198. It's category 2. Okay. That way we at least have something here. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, and then I needed to go into captaincy and add a link to the Thunderhead. Okay, let's take stock of what we got. So I'm thinking at this point, I still want to add a couple more units to tier 2. And again, maybe one more to tier 1 for like a healer type unit, and have that be succeeded somewhere in here by... Maybe that's even an infrastructure unit that can be trained at the quarry, but requires the dispatch or something. That would be kind of... I don't know how, like, logical it would be, but it would work, so it might be worthwhile. Where you get like a healing drone type unit that doesn't have to come out of one of the other production facilities, but you do have to sacrifice workers for. Could be a legitimate legitimate thing. A similar consistent mechanic or whatever. So yeah, we'll I guess we'll revisit some of this later on, but so far I'm liking the way that it's looking, and we will obviously need a name for the tier 4 tech structure, and then figure out what we're doing after that. Right, the ministry. So this is obviously tier 5, so I'm not going to bother actually pushing this yet, but it's something that I'll start getting ready for. All right. So that'll slot in pretty well. We will figure out the rest as time goes on. So yeah, I think that'll do it for the stream. It was a little over 3 hours, and I didn't even take a break, so maybe not the healthiest thing, but we got work done, is what I'm happy about. So we'll leave it at that. Thanks for joining, guys. We will be back in 2 more days for another one of these, so prepare thyselves. By then, I will have the Discord specific chat room, and will encourage Discord chatters, people who are in the Discord server, to use that instead, just so that I can better keep track of them. And beyond that, hopefully whoever is pranking us just loses interest and realizes that he needs to take a good long look at himself and stop being a fucking idiot. That would be nice. Besides that, of course, we will continue to make progress. I'll probably do another recorded session tomorrow where I try to flesh out this stuff and start working on those deeper tiers, while also specifically trying to finalize the early ones, and maybe write some general thoughts on a formula that you can use to understand essentially the way that I'm going about things. Right now, I'm feeling pretty confident that it won't take that many more streams of Ansifii development. Maybe even by the end of this week here, might be all we need to actually get like a. Again, nothing will be final for a long time, but like the first draft of a complete Regency, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, I will leave it at that. Thanks all real humans for joining, and I'll see you in 2 days.